Friends and guests, I am so excited to see a full house here today. And my name is Becky Fields. I am the very proud president of one of the largest Rotary clubs in the world, the Rotary Club of Tulsa. And so let's get our program started today with an invocation from Stevie Charis, song and pledge from past president Matt Davis, visitor introductions from Lane Dolly, and new member introductions from past president Chuck Wilson.
Good morning, and if you'll pray with me. To our Creator, as Rotarians and citizens, we stand before you in unity to serve our great city of Tulsa and ask that all of her people be blessed with the fruitful abundance of success. We ask that the passion we hold for our community and the city to be revealed through our works, that it be infectious and ignite hope throughout our great community, that we are all advocates of education, and that we be the utmost example of service to our community. We ask that our mayor, council, and all leadership in this great city are blessed with protection, personal peace, wisdom to govern with justice and truth, and that the strength to serve a tireless fight for the people of the city of Tulsa. May our great city be overwhelmed with a peace that outstretches to the ends of the earth. Please bless this food to the nourishment of our body and the hands that prepared it. Amen.
In honor of our fabulous mayor, let's sing God Bless America. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Duff Weddle, our member, has worked closely with our two new members to introduce them to Rotary. Duff, thank you very much. Kevin McManus and his wife Erin are both natives of South Carolina, and we are happy to have them in Tulsa along with their 13-year-old son and 11-year-old daughter. He is a partner with Price Waterhouse Coopers, specializing in providing services to privately held businesses. Kevin holds an accounting degree from Presbyterian College in South Carolina and an MBA from the University of South Carolina. He is a CPA. He has chaired PwC's regional annual giving campaign and is involved in the firm's community service initiatives. While spending time with his family, he also coaches soccer in the Metro Tulsa Recreational League. During his adolescent years, little known fact coming up, Kevin was an amateur magician who went by the moniker the Magnificent Mac, complete with business cards and all. He performed magic shows at children's birthday parties and community events around his hometown. While the props are long gone, he still has a few card tricks at the ready, just to warn you. Dan Simone is a CPA and managing partner of PwC. He has been with the firm for 25 years and has held various leadership roles while working with both large U.S. corporations as well as smaller private equity portfolio companies. Dan is a graduate of Indiana University of Pennsylvania and has an MBA from Mays Business School, Texas A&M University. Very committed to the community, he is chair of the board of directors of Street School. He serves on the board of Tulsa's Committee on Foreign Relations, the Reed Community Foundation, and the Tulsa Chamber of Commerce. He has been married for 20 years and has a 15-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son, who both participate, by the way, in national soccer clubs. Little known fact, Dan worked for 10 years through high school and college, tearing down and setting up Ferris wheels. I'm pretty sure we have the only Ferris wheel person in our club coming in now. Is there anyone else who's done Ferris wheels? These two new members and their families have already hosted youth exchange students for our club, so they are getting right into Rotary. Will you please rise and welcome them to our club?
Welcome, Dan and Kevin. We are very excited to have you in the club. Yes.
Sorry. Hey,
Oh, you bet. No problem. Hey, how are you? I'd like to thank this week's meeting sponsors, Doug Stewart with J.D. Young and Matthew Bristow with Clear Ridge. Thank you, sponsors. We have a couple of meetings following the program today. The Programs Committee will meet in room 233 upstairs, and the Board of Directors will have our monthly board meeting in room 231 immediately following the program. And in upcoming programs next week, acclaimed actress Vanessa Adams Harris will perform a moving part from Big Mama Speaks. This is a play written by our very own past president, Hannibal B. Johnson. It is based on his book, Black Wall Street, From Riot to Renaissance in Tulsa's historic Greenwood District. We will also have a very special performance by our very own Phil Armstrong. This is a not-to-miss program. Then on January 29th, our very own Roger Ramsayer, the 2020 Tulsa Regional Chamber Chairman, will join us along with his predecessor, David Stratton, in a strategic discussion moderated by Rotarian and President and CEO of the Chamber, Mike Neal, citing how much we've achieved in our town and also where we're headed. This is another outstanding program not to miss, and to be sure and invite your friends. We also have our social event, which is every month. It's called Thirsty Thursday, and everyone is welcome, so we'd love to see you back out again tomorrow evening. It's at Olvine from 5:30 to 7:30, and we would love to have you there. This is just a social networking time where you get more time to interact with each other and get to know each other and network, and just to meet some more Rotarians, so we hope to see you there. It's always fun. And then on Monday, January 20th, join us at the 41st Annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Commemorative Parade at 11 a.m. So Rotarians, family, and friends will gather at the corner of Greenwood and Archer behind our club's banner. We hope to see you there as well. Well, this Saturday, I don't know if you know, but this Saturday will be Tulsa's 122nd birthday, and I think we look pretty good. In 1879, the first post office opened, followed by the arrival of the railroad. By this time, the area had become known as Tulsetown, as it grew into a trading post and a cattle town. It wasn't until the establishment of the post office in March 1879 that the name Tulsa was adopted as the growing city's name. By the time the city was incorporated on January 18, 1898, the population had grown to 1,100 people. Let's take a look at the screen for a short video.
In the early 1900s, most Americans had never heard of Tulsa. Yet there was a mad rush to get there when the oil boom hit. As scientists, engineers, bankers, and surveyors swarmed the Oklahoma prairie, Tulsa thundered to life.
And here today to talk about everything exciting going on is our Mayor, G.T. Bynum. And I'd like to introduce at this time Phil Lakin, who is going to introduce the mayor. Phil Lakin Jr. has led Tulsa Community Foundation since its formation. Phil works with the Board of Trustees to set the strategic vision and supervises both long-term and daily goals and activities. Phil is passionate about his work with donors, community leaders, and elected officials to improve the Tulsa area. Phil serves the city of Tulsa as the Tulsa City Councilor for District 8, comprising much of South Tulsa. Phil is a native Tulsan and graduate of Jenks High School. He earned his BBA in economics and finance, as well as his MBA from Baylor University. He and his wife, Adrienne, have 3 sons. And a little known fact about Phil that I just found out is that he has hiked all of the 14,000, feet? Yes, I about said meters, and I'm not English, so I don't know. Yeah, feet. The 14ers, as hikers would like to call them, in Colorado, and he's working on finishing all of them in California as well. It's always fun to follow you on Facebook, Phil, and see where you are in the world. So please help me welcome past President Phil Lakin.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. I'm also the past president with the worst attendance record of late, and so I apologize that I'm not here seeing all of your faces more often, but our council meets on Wednesdays, and I wish I could be here rather than there many times. Don't tell anybody that. I've been lucky enough to introduce my friend and our 40th mayor, G.T. Bynum, to this club before, but let me underscore what I said in the past. I have the highest regard and absolute trust in this man. His service during his first term has been exemplary. Not only did he lead us through the unanimous adoption of 3 operating budgets, which is a first, he was our rock during this year's historical floods and our leader through the Improve Our Tulsa votes, which were approved by over 80% of the voters, another first. The title of mayor tends to conjure up images of baby kissing and ribbon cutting, which he does pretty darn well. Media paint rosy pictures of his job. Not often do people quantify the breadth of true responsibility that comes in Tulsa's form of government. By charter, the mayor is, and I quote, Chief Executive and Administrative Officer of the city. He's at the top of a 3,600 employee org chart, directly overseeing and executing on $854 million in budget. But the city's not like a real corporation, you may say. I would disagree. Let me give you a little bit of insight about the corporation that GT is responsible for running, so as you hear him talk today and think of his work in the future, you can weigh his exceedingly diverse and pressing duties as our city's CEO. Tulsa, the company, stored, cleaned, and distributed up to 220 million gallons of water today to its 405,000 customers with 99.9% efficiency. The same water that came into your house, unfortunately or fortunately, took things that you didn't need in your body out of your home through a completely different, elaborate, and expensive system operating with the same efficiency. Tulsa, the corporation, helped you get to this lunch through its 200 square miles, along a few of its 4,348 miles of streets, through some of its 526 signalized intersections, all of which have to be perpetually monitored and maintained. City employees operated our new bus rapid transit system to get people to work, to the grocery, and even some to school. They manned our airport to receive out-of-town guests, many attracted to the Gathering Place, the multi-billion-dollar collection at Gilcrease, or a show at the award-winning BOK Center, all owned by this corporation called the City of Tulsa. The corporation that GT leads will care for 400 species of animals at the zoo this year, in addition to 3,000 abandoned cats and 5,000 abandoned dogs. It will efficiently carry away every ounce of trash that you put at the curb and don't want, converting much of it to steam and energy. And Tulsa, the corporation, will come into your house on your darkest days. When your kitchen catches fire, Tulsa will extinguish it. When you can't provide the emergency medical care your spouse needs, Tulsa will respond. When someone is stealing from or harming you, Tulsa will protect you. Tulsa employees that GT oversees will put themselves between you and those things that can do harm to you. Lives and property are protected by this corporation we simply call Tulsa, and lives and property are rebuilt by it as well. When you think of GT, remember the enormous responsibilities that he has to you, to me, and to the place we call our home. Pray for him, thank him, support him, and volunteer for him. He needs you and us as he takes care of so much for so many. So help me welcome the CEO of Tulsa, Mayor G.T. Bynum.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. That was wonderful. It's always great when one of your best friends gets to introduce you at an event like this. I've had a lot of people in the last couple of years remark to me on what a difference they see in our community, the level of progress we're making. And I attribute a lot of that to the level of collaboration that you see between the mayor's office and the city council. And I was on the council for 8.5 years before I had the chance to become mayor. And there was a lot of that time, nearly all of that time, the main talk in the community was about how the mayor and the council were at odds. And that was the general operating premise, I think, for about 20 years. But it's different now. And I think the best way to explain why that's different is a picture that I keep on my desk right next to my computer in the mayor's office. It's a picture, and I don't even remember why we were there. It's from years ago. Councilor Lakin, Councilor Karen Gilbert, and Councilor Blake Ewing and I were visiting the Tulsa World editorial board, and we walked out and we realized that the City Hall reporter had very unwisely left his desk unguarded. And so we went up and ate his lunch and played around on his computer and had somebody at the World take a picture of us doing this. And that's the picture I keep on my desk to remind me of this ideal that I grew up loving as a student at Cascia Hall and as an undergrad at Villanova that I saw in the priests that ran those institutions. The idea that was espoused by St. Augustine is the idea of serving others in a community of friends. And I feel like we've got that at City Hall right now. And that's why you don't hear about us fighting with each other all the time, even though we disagree. There's been disagreements this week. There will always be disagreements because friends can disagree without being disagreeable. So there is nobody in my time at the city that I've worked more closely with than Phil. And Phil, just thank you very much. There's somebody else I want to thank, though, today. If you were to go back in time, 10 years from right now, you'd be in a city that was going through the worst layoff in Tulsa Police Department history. 130 officers in one day lost their jobs. And in the midst of that, in a time when the chief of police found out that he was fired from reading about it on the Tulsa World website, we had somebody step up in this unprecedented, difficult situation in the midst of the Great Recession and take the helm through some of the greatest challenges that our city has faced around issues between police and community relations, when we've had predators driving around North Tulsa, killing black Tulsans during the Good Friday shootings. He was the steady hand at that helm every step of the way. And now we're here in 2020. We're in the midst of the greatest hiring expansion in the history of the Tulsa Police Department. We are building that department based on data. We are building the most diverse police department we've ever had, a department that reflects the city that it is there to police. And all that time, from that horrible low point through those challenging times to today, where our department is at as good a point as it's been in my lifetime, there's been one leader. And he's getting ready to retire, dang it. And you all know who I'm talking about because he's our fellow Rotarian and he's here today. And I'd ask you to all please stand up and join me in thanking Chuck Jordan for his service. Thank you, Chief. Imagine being the unlucky guy that tries to find out who's going to pick up the baton from somebody like that. But we are going through that now, and Chief has been a great source of counsel to me on that process. We announced this morning we have 4 finalists, and there's been a lot of questions about, why are we focused on inside the department? I will tell you, and I've told him, one of the great talents that Chief Jordan's brought to this job is leadership development. Our Tulsa Police Department has an extraordinary group of leaders at the helm of it because Chief Jordan has, in many of them, helped them grow from the days they joined the academy and certainly helped them progress up through the leadership hierarchy of that department. We announced today that we'll be doing a town hall meeting on Friday night. It's really not even a meeting, it's a meet and greet. With the 4 finalists for that job in alphabetical order. That's Deputy Chief Jonathan Brooks, Deputy Chief Eric Daglish, Major Wendell Franklin, and Deputy Chief Dennis Larson. And it'll be at 6 o'clock this Friday night at Ellen Ochoa Elementary in their auditorium. And this is really just a chance for Tulsans to come out and meet each of them, learn more about them, hear what their thoughts are for the future of the department, and get to know them. So if any of you are interested in that and getting to know these applicants, you're certainly encouraged and invited to be there this Friday at 6 o'clock. Now, I'm here today, though, and I love that video at the beginning about the history of our city and our birthday. I told Councilor Lakin, I'm glad you mentioned it was the birthday this weekend. I feel like the dad who forgot his kid's birthday. So Saturday, we'll be excited. But we issued today our annual report for the city of Tulsa. This is very important for us in keeping track because there's so many people working very hard on so many different fronts right now at the city. It's important, one, within our own team at the city for everyone to be aware of everything that's going on and to hold ourselves to the high standards that the council and I have established of really becoming a globally competitive world-class city. But it's also important for our customers, the citizens of Tulsa, to see what's happening. And you can go online at cityoftulsa.org and find that annual report. I don't have enough time to hit all of it today, but I do want to give you a couple of big highlights because we're living in historic times here in Tulsa right now. First, as Councilor Lakin mentioned, in May we responded to really a potentially unprecedented series of natural disasters in Tulsa. We were struck by an earthquake. A lot of people forget the earthquake. Then we were hit by tornadoes. Then we began to flood. Then we were hit by more tornadoes while we were flooding. I remember being in the bunker at our Emergency Operations Center with Governor Stitt and our whole team that was working on this, and we needed to go up and have a press conference to tell everybody what they should be doing to deal with the flooding. And this is the room that we're going to meet in. It's just surrounded by glass windows, floor-to-ceiling glass windows. And we're down in this bunker, and this is like 3 or 4 days into this deal. The sirens start going off like 5 minutes before we were supposed to go to our press conference. And the governor and I looked at each other and we're like, we don't care. We're going to go on up and do it anyway. Everyone, you become desensitized to the presence of tornadoes when you have flooding occurring constantly. But it was, I think, such a reminder of the strength and resilience of this community. When you look at, I never heard a single first responder say, that's not my job, or am I getting overtime for this? Everybody just needed to know where they were supposed to be next to keep people safe. The same could be said for the citizens of Tulsa. You know, we talk a lot about what a generous city and how we're here for each other from a philanthropic standpoint, but I will tell you, that is the mode I saw in every part of our city in the 2.5 weeks that event went on, was people weren't worried about themselves. They needed the information to protect their families and their friends. And as long as they had that, Tulsans would take care of the rest. It was, I think, one of the, to pull a phrase from Winston Churchill, one of the finest hours our city has seen. We also, in the last year, from a public safety standpoint, we completed the first year of operation of the Tulsa Sobering Center. This is another one of the innovations that we put in place under Chief Jordan's leadership. I've talked about how we're staffing up, but we're also policing more intelligently. And we looked at data and we found that many of the people, in fact, the number one thing that we were arresting people for on municipal charges was public intoxication. Yet, historically, we would just take people to jail and lock them up, often with violent criminals, not addressing the root of the problem. And we found that most people who were in jail for public intoxication either made a once-in-a-lifetime mistake or they needed drug and alcohol counseling, and they weren't getting it locked up in jail. And so we partnered with 12 and 12. We opened the Tulsa Sobering Center. And now when someone is picked up for public intoxication, not DUI, not getting drunk and assaulting somebody, but just public intoxication, they're offered the choice. You can either go to jail or you can go to the Sobering Center where you sleep it off for 12 hours. At the end of that 12 hours, 12 and 12 offers you counseling. If you want it, you get it. If you don't, you're put in a cab and taken away, back to where you were picked up. What we find is, even when intoxicated, almost everybody takes door number 2 when given that option. And the great thing is that we've had thousands of people in the last year go from interacting with a police officer to 15 minutes later, they're in the care of a world-class treatment center that can give them the help they need if they want it. And what I love about this is that it addresses the root cause of the problem. It makes better use of officer time. It takes 5 minutes for an officer to drop somebody off here. It costs us hundreds of thousands of dollars less to do this than it does to jail somebody. So it is a win-win all around, and it's an example of the way we're trying to police more intelligently. One of the great points of pride in the last year, we talk a lot when we talk about public safety about policing, but the Tulsa Fire Department really hit an extraordinary milestone in the last year. They received an ISO Class 1 rating. That means that the citizens of Tulsa receive the best fire protection in the country. That's as good as you can get for a fire department as a Class 1 rating. There's only a handful of fire departments in the nation that have this rating, but the Tulsa Fire Department has achieved that. It will have a positive impact on people's insurance ratings moving forward because of that ISO Class 1 rating. This was also our first year of operation for the Tulsa Municipal Lockup. We talked about the mayor and the council not fighting. Anybody heard the city and the county fighting over the jail lately? No, Commissioner Keith and I are super happy about that not being a point of contention anymore because we recognize that you have different types of folks that you would be arresting on a municipal charge than you do on a state charge, which is how they would go to the county jail. And this has allowed us to speed up the pace of people getting in front of a judge. Studies show that the longer somebody spends in a jail, the greater their odds of recidivism are. Now, instead of days, we're talking about hours between when somebody goes into the lockup and when they're before a judge. We also had some big gains from an economic development standpoint in the last year. One of the most consistent concerns that I've heard throughout my time as a city councilor and certainly as mayor is the concern about people who want to invest in Tulsa, but our development process, our permit application process was slow as molasses. And when you're investing in a real estate project, time is money. So we took a look at that because we'd always heard anecdotal horror stories from people. So I asked our team to look at what's the time it takes between when somebody submits an application for a permit to do a project and we return it to them with whatever they need, just the first go around. And we found that it was 25 working days. That's 5 weeks, just for somebody to look at your application and turn it back in. So we did two things. One, we created a dashboard where all of that information is returned to my management team automatically. So there's no go-between. As soon as it goes in and as soon as it's returned, we know on an average how we're doing from that standpoint. The other thing that we found out was that the city had not increased the number of staff that processed those applications to reflect the volume of applications we were receiving. So that thanks to support from the city council, we hired the right number of people. It wasn't that there were these malicious haters of development working at the city. That was the conventional wisdom, unfortunately. What we found was that it was good people who were buried under too many applications, and the city didn't have their back to give them the number of colleagues they needed to get things processed. And so we staffed that department up, and in 1 year, we went from 5 weeks on our average turnaround time to 5 days. Now, we're not satisfied with 5 days. We want it to be better than that. And we recognize there are a lot of other things we can be doing, but I'm really proud of the way that our team and the development community could have rebelled against this, but against the notion of the increased fees that took to staff that department, but they supported it. So this is a way where when we can get good people in our community together, we can solve a problem that has been seemingly intransigent for years. We've also had tremendous investment in Tulsa. And if any of you have heard me talk around town before, you've heard me say this, but I really, I love that video. I love the history of our city. And in my mind, you've got 3 big periods of change in the history of Tulsa from a growth standpoint. You have the 20s and 30s, when Tulsa really became a city, when so much of what we love about downtown was built, when we built one of the first airports in the world, when our water line that was such a marvel of civil engineering that the President of the United States came here to open it, all those things were built which facilitated Tulsa growing as a city. In the 60s and 70s, we grew as a metro area. That's when the highway network is built that connected Tulsa to the suburbs, facilitated that growth. That's when we created a city-county health department, a city-county library system. We really started relating to one another as a metro area, not just as one little city. We're in the 3rd wave of growth right now. You're living through a period of time that people will be reading books about decades from now. And that future generations of Tulsans will be looking at the buildings that are under construction right now. And let me give you just a couple examples from an economic development standpoint. You know, one of the most exciting things that happened last year, WPX, that's a company that every state in America would love to have them in their state. But WPX kept their commitment to Tulsa, and they're building a $110 million headquarters facility in the Greenwood district right now. Muncie Power Products has relocated their facility from elsewhere in the city to the Peoria Mohawk area industrial park in North Tulsa, and they're building a $50 million facility in that area and working with Tulsa Community Work Advance so that folks that live around their facility can get jobs in their facility. The View, which is going to be a very cool apartment building across from One Oak Field, broke ground in the Greenwood district. That's a $30 million project. Vast Bank is almost done building a $40 million project of their own. That's just a handful. There was a time when any one of those projects would have been the news of the year. But there's tremendous investment happening in Tulsa right now, all around us. We also, on the public side, we just broke ground on USA BMX's Olympic Training and Trials Facility in the Greenwood District. And that will bring people from all around the world to Tulsa, and there will be Olympic athletes that live and train here year-round. Inside City Hall, the council and I, as Councilor Lakin mentioned, 3 years in a row now, we've established a different budget process. It used to be when I was on the council that we would sit in anticipation, and then the mayor, with much aplomb, would present a budget by the end of April, and then we'd have to scramble to figure out what was in it and make our amendments to it within a 2-month period of time. And that entire process was combative because it was combative between the mayor and the city council. So instead, when I came in as mayor, we changed the whole process. We now have a retreat in December or January. We identify what we want the budget to look like, and then we work together until it's due at the end of April to develop a budget that's a joint work product. It's not the mayor's budget. It's our team at the city's budget. Because of that process, 3 years in a row, there have been no amendments to the budget that's presented. No fights, because the council isn't surprised when they receive it, because they worked hand in hand with me to develop it. A big point, which I like to raise, is that it is a balanced budget. That's unfortunately, an increasingly quaint notion in government these days. But we have the responsibility as a city government to present a balanced budget. And so all these improvements that you hear about and you see the things that the city is doing, all of those are done within the framework of what we're receiving. In fact, the last 2 years, we've been able to triple the size of our rainy day fund because the council and I have been very conservative in our revenue estimates, and we ended up bringing in more over the course of the year than we had budgeted for. That's a far change from the days of getting halfway through the year and having to talk about hiring freezes, and I can tell you it's made a huge impact on morale with our city employees. We're also focused on the city of Tulsa being the kind of place where every kid has an equal shot at a great life. And we're focused on that in 2 primary areas. The first one is, and you've heard a lot about it, our commitment to addressing issues of racial disparity in our city. And I don't think that we do that through gut feel and anecdote. I think that we have to bring data to bear on that to show us what the true problems are, and then we can work together as Tulsans to address them. And we've done that through a report that we issue called the Tulsa Equality Indicators. And it looks at Tulsa through a broad range of different frameworks and looks at where things are not what they ought to be from an equality standpoint. This has led to a lot of really challenging discussions, which I want to give them all the credit in the world. The City Council has led over the last year about disparities in policing and what we can do to address that. I also want to give the Tulsa Police Department a lot of credit because they've been there at every single one of those meetings that the City Council's had, and they want this to be the best city it can be for all Tulsans. So that report has triggered a lot of the discussions that may have been murmured about historically in Tulsa, where people thought something might be happening, but they didn't know. Now you can go and look at the data, and you can see for yourself where we're doing well and where we're not. Maybe the the thing I love most about what we're doing right now, or that we've changed in the last year at the city, is that we're the first city in the state of Oklahoma to host naturalization ceremonies. What we found out is that there are over 10,000 people living in the Tulsa area who are eligible to become American citizens. There were two problems there. One, there's a lot of legal work to go through that process, and a lot of people couldn't afford to go through it. So we partnered with the YWCA and got a grant, which we are using to fund legal assistance for Tulsans who want to go through the immigration process and become Americans. The other thing is that we had so many people here in Tulsa going through that process and becoming American citizens, but there were not enough ceremonies here locally to host them, and so they were having to get in a car and go over to Oklahoma City. Well, I think as Tulsans, we can all agree that's totally unacceptable. And so we started in the last year, every month now, it's the second Thursday of every month at 11 o'clock at City Hall. We host a naturalization ceremony for Tulsans who've gone through that process. We're averaging about 50 people every month that go through that. You know, there's so much negativity right now in our country around immigration because everybody wants to jump out and debate illegal immigration. But I'll tell you, when you go to one of these ceremonies and you meet people who have taken such great risks to leave the place where they were born and to risk everything financially because they see America and Oklahoma and Tulsa as this beacon of freedom and opportunity for them and their families, it just fills you with so much pride in our country. And it makes you want to do whatever you can to make this the best city it can be for them. And so this is one little way that we can do that. And we've also created a program called the New Tulsans Initiative, which exists to make this the best city it can be for our newest Tulsans. We had a big year from an infrastructure standpoint. As Councilor Lakin mentioned, we passed the Improve Our Tulsa program. I was here to give you a quick spiel about it in the last year. What none of us anticipated, though, and I know Mike Neal's here, their team at the Chamber led that campaign. None of us expected the kind of overwhelming support that Tulsans showed in that vote. To have the streets portion of that program get 85% of the vote, and of the three initiatives, the lowest one got 80%. There has never been a citywide election of that kind of margin of victory. And yes. There's two ways to look at that. Either that's 50 years in the making of terrible street maintenance, but I like to think that it's because Tulsans recognize that we can all play a part in building up our infrastructure, especially our street infrastructure, where it ought to be, giving our first responders the vehicles they need, and making our parks safer for Tulsa kids. So I'm very grateful. So many people in this room helped make that happen. There was a time when Tulsa was demolishing rec centers under cover of darkness. We've now changed that. We brought in a new parks director, Anna America, former city councilor, former Tulsa school board member, former executive director of Up With Trees, and she's a dynamo in that job. And one of the main things I told Anna when I was interviewing her for the job was, no more rec center demolitions. We're going to find a way not just to keep them mothballed, but we want to get them reopened. And we've had three really exciting ones just in the last few months. We just announced a partnership to reopen the Ben Hill Community Center in North Tulsa. The McClure Park Community Center in East Tulsa is now the home of the Tulsa Glassblowing Studio. If you haven't been over there, I highly recommend it. The work they're doing, especially with our veterans community, is remarkable. And then also in North Tulsa at Chamberlain Park, we have reopened fully and renamed the community center there, the Jane Malone Community Center, after Jane Malone, who is a long-time neighborhood leader and builder in that area. We also initiated in the last year something that, if I'm being honest, should have been done about 96 years ago, but was left to this generation of Tulsans to do now, which is to try and find the graves of our fellow Tulsans who were murdered in the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. And we have partnered with the Oklahoma Archaeological Survey, who has led that work. We do regular public meetings that anyone can attend to update everyone on what's happening with that process. Just the latest news, which we found in December, is that they have found a hand-dug trench in Oak Lawn Cemetery that they say is consistent with a mass grave. Now, the question there is that it could be any number of things, 3 of those possibilities. There was a Spanish flu epidemic that came through Tulsa in 1919. It could be a mass grave from that. It could also be a mass grave for people who couldn't afford to be buried in the early 20th century and were buried in such a fashion. Or it could be a mass grave from the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. And so now, the process moving forward is that we're looking at what it will take to excavate that site and to try and learn more about what is in that hand-dug trench. And a lot of people ask me, why are we looking into this now? And I have 2 answers to that. 1, because nobody did before. And 2, I would ask you to imagine that you're in your house one night and all of a sudden somebody comes up and pounds on your door and says, "There's a riot, you've got to come with me to the Coliseum," which was our convention and sports arena in 1921. And you go to the Coliseum, you go in there, and then they lock you in there for 3 days with a whole bunch of other people, and then they let you out. And when you get out, you walk back to your house, and your house is burned to the ground, and there's members of your family missing, and your city government says to you, "We're not going to help you find what happened to your family." And then we wonder why we've had 100 years of racial challenges in Tulsa with that kind of a message. So I think Tulsa in 2020 is prepared to send a different message to our neighbors about our commitment to the truth and to finding out what happened on that night in our city. Thank you. Lastly, one very exciting initiative that we've launched this year is on the public transit front. Tulsa is one of the first cities in America to have bus rapid transit. You've probably seen them now, the Arrow line that runs up and down Peoria. We picked Peoria to have bus rapid transit because it's the most densely populated corridor of our city. 1 in 7 Tulsans lives within a mile of Peoria. 1 in 5 Tulsans works within a mile of Peoria. And so the Arrow bus rapid transit runs from 56th Street North down to 81st Street. And if you've seen it, you know it's not called bus rapid transit because they're driving really fast down Peoria. What makes it fast is the wait time between the buses. Our average wait time for a Metro Tulsa Transit Authority bus is 45 minutes. With bus rapid transit, you're talking 12 to 14 minutes. And we have really, I think, beautiful stations that have been set aside where you can go to them, you can see when the next bus is going to arrive, buy your ticket, and hop on it. A lot of people have said, why don't we have light rail in Tulsa? And the challenge for really an advance anywhere close to that from a public transportation standpoint is that most people in Tulsa don't use public transit because we've funded it and utilized it as a vehicle of last resort for 50 years. It has never existed as a vehicle of choice in Tulsa. We wanted to give Tulsans the opportunity to see what it would be like to have public transit as a vehicle of choice and see what you think. And that's what the bus rapid transit line on Peoria will do. The voters approved and improve our Tulsa. The capital will build an east to west line up and down the Route 66 corridor, which you'll hear a lot about the planning of that over the next couple of years. A few things to look forward to in the year ahead that are very exciting. The whole reason I ran for the city council in 2008 was the failure of the Our River Yes campaign, the Water in the River initiative. I remember watching it that night, and I couldn't believe that it failed. And then when it did, there were comments made that well, maybe somebody will come along 10 years from now and figure out how to do this. And I had worked for Senator Nichols and Senator Coburn in the Senate, and I thought, when we lost an important bill in the Senate, we didn't wait 10 years and hope somebody would do it. We figured out what we needed to do to get people on board to get it passed. And so I started running for the council, and I always remember the first house I knocked on, knocking doors in my neighborhood. Hi, I'm G.T. Bynum. I live down the street from you. I'm running for the city council because I want to get water in the river. And this guy was like, well, hey, G.T. Bynum, that sounds great. But how about fixing these streets first? I was like, oh, okay, I'll take note of that. Second house, exact same thing. Third house, same thing. And that's when I realized we had to shore up our credibility from a public infrastructure standpoint before we could ask citizens to get on board with water in the river. That's why we, one of the big reasons that we did things in the order we did. Fix our streets, the largest streets improvement program in the history of the city in 2008. Then in 2013, Councilor Lakin and I and our colleagues on the council led the effort to put together Improve Our Tulsa, which exceeded the amount for streets by about 50% over the previous program. And now we've had the most recent Improve Our Tulsa pass overwhelmingly. And so we're doing what we need to do to catch up on about 40 years of deferred maintenance. But in 2016, we asked Tulsans to approve what, and a lot of you know my granddad, Bob LaFortune. Sorry, Channel 2. Too many hand gestures up here. But a lot of you know my granddad, Bob LaFortune. When he came on as the Commissioner of Streets and Public Property in 1964, he helped develop this program called the River Lakes Program, that called for constructing a series of low-water dams through Tulsa that would allow us to be safe from a flood control standpoint, but have lakes that better utilize the Arkansas River. And in 2016, 52 years after that program was presented to the city, the voters approved the creation of 2 of those lakes in our city. The great news is Lake number 1, which will start at about 29th and Riverside, right by the gathering place, and will extend for 3 miles upstream. It'll be about 8 to 10 feet deep. It will change the way people use recreation in the middle of our city. You think about how excited everybody gets one day of the year when we have the raft race. Well, imagine year-round being able to utilize that river for recreation. We're going to start construction on that dam this year. And so it is very exciting, yeah. So it did end up being 10 years, but I'm very excited at what that can mean for our city. In closing, I really want to thank you all. I mean, the people that are in this room are the people who get it done in Tulsa. And a lot of the things that I've talked about today, we're not doing them at the city in some sort of silo. We're doing them in collaboration with the leaders of this community, and that's you. So thank you for your commitment to our community. Thank you for building the kind of Tulsa that our kids and our grandkids are going to be proud of decades from now. It's a very exciting time in our city, and it's the honor of my life to be your mayor. Thank you.
We have time for just a few questions, so if anyone has a question for the mayor.
Yes, Commissioner, great question. So as part of that construction of the dam, we will also be building a new pedestrian bridge over the Arkansas River that will connect Gathering Place with the West Bank. This is a bridge that has been designed by Michael Van Valkenburg and Associates, the same architect of the Gathering Place, so it will really create a seamless flow between the park out over the new lake on the river and then over to the West Bank, connecting to the bike trails and everything that's over there. I've had a lot of people ask me why not just keep the old bridge. That is a 100-plus-year-old railroad bridge that was built before the era of reinforced concrete. And so we did an analysis on it Yeah, we did an analysis on it about 5 years ago, and the structural engineers came back to us and told us, I mean, it was so dangerous that they didn't even want a person walking across it, and that's why we tore off the ends of that bridge to keep people from getting on it. I'll be honest with you, the biggest surprise of the whole flood event to me was that it didn't take out that bridge. The concrete pillars that it's on are cracked throughout, the entire bridge is rusted out, and to repair it, we're looking at a cost around the same as just building a new pedestrian bridge, which would be built for pedestrians. That bridge was built for trains to go across the river, not for people to walk across. So we'll be doing both projects at the same time because we'll have to build cofferdams out in the river. It saves a lot of money if we just do it all at one time rather than doing one and then a year later doing another. So you'll see all of that happen at the same time. Yes?
So regarding the recreation centers, that brings my heart great joy that you're reopening and refurbishing. What about some of the ones that were knocked down? For example, Turner Park. Will some of those be reinstalled? Is that the long-term plan?
The discussions to date have not included construction of any new rec centers. I know in my council district we had a number of them. And to give you an understanding of why this phenomenon occurred, back in the 70s, the Nixon administration put in a program called revenue sharing, and where they would send significant amounts of money to local governments, and the city of Tulsa used ours to build and staff rec centers. But then in the 80s, that program went away, and with it, the funding for all of those rec centers. And so over the years, the city cut back staffing over and over and over again, and then finally, we had a number of rec centers that had been vacant for so long that it made no financial sense to try and refurbish them, and they were demolished. But we put a freeze on demolitions over the last 3 years. And again, I'm super grateful that we have a strong park board and a great park director in On America who have reached out and not tried to have the city do it all by ourselves, but relied on one of the strengths of our community, which is the desire of Tulsans to help a good cause, and found partners to work with us in reopening these others that had been standing vacant for years. Yes, sir. Oh, boy. I'll tell you, the question is about Yale 81st to 91st or wherever we're going to do that project. That project is so expensive that we even did an analysis on whether it would be cheaper to just burrow a tunnel through that hill. Really. Ultimately found that was not the case. The road that's on that hill is sliding down it. Sometimes if you're driving over it, you'll see the guardrails bent over and it looks like somebody hit it with a car. It's not because a car hit it, it's because the road is sliding down the hill. And so we are going to go in, I believe it's this year, right? The design, in about a year and a half we'll start the construction on that project. And I want to give all the credit in the world on that, Councilor Lakin, who insisted on that project being included in the original Improve Our Tulsa program and who has been the hands-on person at the city in working with neighbors and businesses that are impacted by that to make sure we have the right lane structure and width because it's going to be a very disruptive project initially, but the end product will be so much better. So we're expecting construction in about 18 months. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Bynum, for a wonderful presentation as always. We appreciate you fitting us in to your very busy schedule, and I just appreciate your voice of unity and positivity and growth, and Tulsans love you. So thanks for being here today. A book recognizing today's program will be presented to our partner school in education, Celia Clinton, and that is Happy Birthday to You, and we'll ask the mayor to inscribe a little note to the students that will go in their library. Since 1879, Tulsans have been making their mark on the world and changing the world. And you, as the Rotary Club of Tulsa, the great Rotary Club of Tulsa, one of the largest Rotary clubs in the world, have been an integral part of that success and those changes. Rotarians, you are agents of change. Now go change the world.